So in today's video, I am going to show you how to make this crochet hood with the attached scarf. So these hooded scarves are such a great beginner project or a quick project for seasoned crocheters. I love making these for the winter. They're super cute and super functional and super easy. So for this project, I am going to be using a weight 4 or a worsted weight yarn, a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. So I'm using the Big Twist Value yarn. I have the color Ivory, Taupe, and Light Rose. I'm going for a Neapolitan ice cream kind of a color palette. So these are the 3 colors that I've chosen, but you can use as many or as few colors as you like. So to get started, I am going to pick my first color, which is going to be this taupe color. So to get started, I am going to make a slip knot. Put that on my hook. Now I'm going to chain 4. Now I'm going to slip stitch into that first stitch. So I'm going to go into it and slip stitch. Now I'm going to chain 3. And this is going to count as our first double crochet. So now I'm going to make another double crochet, going right back into that circle. So yarn over, go through the circle, pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, pull through 2. Now you'll have 2 loops on your hook, pull through 2. So now we're going to make another double crochet, still going into the circle, pull through 2, pull through 2. So that's your first cluster of 3 double crochets or a granny stitch. Now chain 1 and make 3 more double crochets into the center of the circle. So now we have 2 clusters. Chain 1, make another cluster of 3 double crochets into the circle. Now we have 3 clusters, and we're going to chain 1 and make our 4th and final cluster of 3 double crochets into the middle of our circle. So now I'm going to chain 1, and now I'm going to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3. So I can see 1, 2, 3 stitches, so I know that's the top. I'm going to slip stitch into that stitch. And now I'm going to tie off. So I've just tied off my first color. We can grab this little tail back here and pull, and that's going to tighten up our circle a little bit. You can see we've kind of got a tiny square starting to form. So now I'm going to grab my second color, which for me is going to be the white. So now with my white, I'm going to make a slip knot. And now in these chain 1 spaces, there is a little space. I'm going to put my hook right through that space. And I'm going to put my yarn on the hook. I'm going to pull through and chain 3. And that's going to be our first double crochet of this round. So now in this same space, I'm going to place 2 more double crochets. Now I'm going to yarn over, and in that next chain 1 space over here, I'm going to put 3 double crochets. Chain 1, and in that same space we're going to do 3 more double crochets. So we are creating a corner. So our corner spaces are going to be a cluster, chain 1, cluster in the same space. So we just formed our first corner of this round. Now I'm going to yarn over and go into the next corner corner space, and I'm going to make 3 double crochets. Chain 1, and in that same space I'm making 3 more double crochets. And as I go, I am holding my tails against the back of my work and crocheting over them, just so I don't have to go back and weave them all in at the end. But if you don't want to do that, you can just leave them out and weave them in later. Now I'm going to do 3 double crochets in the next corner space. Chain 1, 3 more double crochets in that same space. Now we are going to go in and finish this corner space that we started off on. So to do that, I am going to place 3 double crochets in that corner space. Chain 1, and I'm going to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 to finish off this corner. So we've just finished our second round, tie off, and now we are going to start our third round, and I am going to grab my third color. So I am going to make a slip knot, go into any corner space. I'm just going to go into this one, put that slip knot on your hook, and pull through chain 3. So that's our first double crochet of this round. Yarn over and make 2 more double crochets. Now we have a side space. So in our side spaces, we're just going to place 1 cluster of 3 double crochets. So now we're at a corner space. So I'm going to work 3 double crochets, chain 1, and then 3 more double crochets. Now I'm at a side space again, so I am going to work 3 double crochets into that space. Now our next space is a corner space, so I'm going to do 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 more double crochets in that same space. Now we're at a side space, so 3 double crochets. And you're going to continue this pattern until you get all the way back to the corner space we started in. So I just made it back to my corner space. I made 3 double crochets in that space. I'm going to chain 1, and now to join the corners I am going to slip stitch into the top of that first chain 3. And now I am going to tie off. So now I am going to go back to my first color for round 4. So make a slip knot, insert into a corner space, pull your slip knot through and chain 3. Now place 2 double crochets in that same space. And this row is going to be very, very similar to our last row. So we are going to make 3 double crochets in each side space, and then a cluster of double crochets, chain 1, cluster in the corner spaces. So I'm going to make a cluster in this next side space. Make a cluster in the next side space. And then a corner, so 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets in that same space. So that's how we are going to continue around. 3 double crochets in each side space, and then 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets in each corner space. So I am going to go around this round and place those double crochets, and then I will meet you when I get back to the beginning to end this row and start the next one. So I just made it all the way around. This is how my square is looking. So I did a cluster of 3 double crochets in that first corner stitch that we started off in. So now to finish it off, I'm going to chain 1 and slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. So we are going to follow that pattern to make 2 more rows. So we're doing clusters of 3 double crochets in all of the side spaces, 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets for corners. I'm going to do those next 2 rows and then I will meet you back here. So I just finished my 6th row. I placed my last cluster, I did my chain 1. Now I'm going to slip stitch to finish this row off. So now that we're done with this row, I'm going to tie off, and this square is done. So this is how mine looks. So now that we've finished this one, we are going to make 3 more of these granny squares. We need a total of 4 granny squares for this pattern. So make 3 more of these, and then I will meet you back here to start on the scarf portion. So to start on our scarf portion, we are going to make a slip knot. Put that slip knot on your hook. And now we are going to chain 216. Now, because we're chaining such a long chain, I recommend keeping maybe a notepad and a pen next to you or using an online counter. Like every 10 to 20 stitches, I would just make a tally or use your counter just so you don't lose track. So I'm going to chain 216. So now that I have all 216 chains done, I am going to start my granny stitches. So we are going to count 3 stitches from our hook. So 1, 2, 3. And we are going to put 2 double crochets in that next stitch, so the 4th stitch from the hook. And this is our first granny cluster. So those 3 stitches on the end are going to count as a double crochet. So we made 2 more to make a total of 3. Now we are going to skip 2 stitches, go into that 3rd stitch, and place 3 double crochets in that 3rd stitch. So we are going to continue that pattern, so skip 2 and work 3 double crochets into that 3rd stitch. Skip 2, 3 double crochets in the 3rd stitch. And this is what we're going to do all the way back down our chain. So keep going, putting a cluster of 3 double crochets in every 3rd stitch. So you'll make a cluster, skip 2, and then make another cluster. So I'll keep going, and when I get to the end of my chain, I will meet you back here to start the next row. Alright, so I'm getting super close to the end of my chain. I have 3 more stitches, so I am going to put 3 double crochets in that last stitch to make my last granny cluster of this row. Alright, so we just finished row 1. So here is how mine is looking so far. So now we need to turn our work, chain 3, and now into this space we are going to put 3 double crochets. So we're going directly into that space, not into the stitch. So through the space and 3 double crochets. So that is how we are going to do row number 2. We are just going to keep going down the row and placing 3 double crochets in every space. After this row, we are going to be doing a color change. So I'm going to keep going, and then once I get a little bit closer to the end of the row, I'll come back and show you how to finish it off and then change color. So I am going into my last space and placing my cluster. So to end the row off, I am going to put 1 double crochet in the top of that 3rd stitch from our initial chain 3. So I did my double crochet, and now we are going to switch colors. So I am going to tie off, and I am going to leave a pretty decently long tail. So now that I've tied off, we are going to turn our work. Now I'm going to insert my hook into the top of that double crochet that we just made. And now I'm going to grab my second color. So now that I've got my second color, I am going to make a slip knot, put that on my hook, pull it through and chain 3. So because this row starts with a space, we are going to put 2 double crochets into that space. So that first chain 3 is going to count as a double crochet. We're going to put 2 more so that we can have a cluster of 3 double crochets. So now that we've got our first cluster, we are going to go down the row, putting a cluster of 3 in every space just like we did on our previous row. So I'm going to keep going and working my clusters until I get a little bit closer to the end, and then I'll show you how to end this row and start the next one. So I am coming up on my last space here at the end of my row, so I am going to put 3 double crochets directly into that space, and that is how I'm going to end out this row. So we're going to be doing 2 rows of each color, so it's not time for me to change color yet. So I'm going to turn my work, chain 3. Now this row doesn't start with a space, it starts with a cluster. So we are just going to chain 3 and then go into that next space and put 3 double crochets. So now we've started our 4th row. Now to finish out this row, I am going to put a cluster in every space all the way down. So once I get down to the end, I will meet you down there to change colors again and start the next row. So I just got to the end of this row. So because it ends in a cluster, we are just going to do a double crochet right into the top of that initial chain 3. And because this is our second row of this color, we are going to go ahead and tie off and change color again. So now that I've tied off, I am going to turn my work, grab my next color, make a slip knot, am going to go right into that double crochet that we just made into the top there and pull this up and chain 3. So now I am going to go into this space and do 2 double crochets to create our first cluster in that first space. So now, the same as the previous rows, I am going to keep going. So I'm going to do 2 rows of this color and then I will meet you back here. So I'm just finishing my second row of this brown. So I am going to double crochet right into the top of that initial chain 3. And now I am going to tie off. All right, and now we are going to do 2 rows of the pink. So I am going to turn my work and attach the pink the same way that we've attached our other colors and keep going. I'm going to do 2 rows of the pink and then I will meet you back here. So now that we're finished with our scarf and we have 4 of these granny squares made, it's time to connect our granny squares. So you'll have them laid out 3 in a row right side up, and then the 4th one will be right on top of this middle one. So I'm going to start down here in this right corner where these 2 granny squares meet. So I'm going to join my granny squares using a flat slip stitch, which is what I'm going to show you. But if you would prefer to just sew them together or single crochet or slip stitch them together, you definitely can. It's not going to change the look of the finished product too much. So I am going to get started by making a slip knot. And again, I'm starting down here, so I'm just going to move these out of the way so that we can look a little bit closer at what we're doing here. So I have the corners lined up. I'm going to put that slip knot on my hook. Now we are going to find the chain 1 space in this corner on the right hand side. So we can see our 3 double crochets. And here's that chain 1 space. So we're going to go into the back loop only. We've got the front loop here, back loop here. So go through the back loop. In this working yarn, we're going to move it to be in the middle between our 2 squares. So move it over. Now you're going to look at the square on the left hand side and find that chain 1 stitch. So it's right here. And we again are going to go through the back loop. So front loop, back loop. Go through that back loop. Now we've got 3 loops on our hook. We are going to pull our working yarn through all 3. And that is how we start our flat slip stitch. And the way that we continue it is basically exactly the same as that. So we'll find our next stitch. So here's our next stitch. And we are going to go through the back loop only. Now let's look at the left side. And we're going to find the next stitch and go through the back loop only. And we're going to make sure we're keeping this working yarn in the middle the whole time. So now we've got the 3 loops on our hook. Pull through all 3. So find the next stitch on your right side. Go through the back loop. Find the next stitch on the left side. Go through the back loop. Pull through all 3 loops. So what you should be seeing is kind of a flat line forming where we're joining our squares. So that's how mine looks so far. So I'll show you one more time before finishing off these squares. So back loop on the right side, back loop on the left side, pull through all 3. So I'm going to keep doing that all the way up, and once I get a little closer to this corner, I will stop and come back to show you how we will round our corner and attach our other squares together. So I'm getting close to being done with this square, so I have just a few more stitches left. I'm going to go into the right, left, pull through, and now the last stitch I have is that chain 1 stitch. So just like we did at the beginning, I'm going to go through the back loop, go through the back loop, pull through. So now these two squares are fully joined, and now we are going to work on joining this middle square to the top of this square. So I am going to turn my work so that my middle square is now on my right side. My bottom square is now on my left side, the square that we just attached. I am going to now look at this new square that we're going to attach, and I'm going to find that middle chain 1 stitch in that corner. And I am going to insert my hook into the back loop only. Now I am going to go over to my left side, and I'm going to find the middle chain 1 stitch on this corner, which is the stitch that we just went into. And I'm going to go into that. Now we've got the 3 loops on our hook. Pull through all 3 to attach these squares. So now we are going to go up these 2 squares, attaching them the same way that we did the other one. So we'll look at the next stitch and go through the back loop. Find the next stitch on the left side, go through the back loop, pull through all 3. So we're going to keep going, and I will again meet you when we get closer to the edge of these 2 squares. So I am getting close to the end here, so I am going to do this last stitch. And then we have our chain 1 stitch. We're going to connect those. So now we have this L shape. Now we are going to turn again. So we've got this L shape. We've got our middle square here, 1, 2, and then we're going to connect our 3rd square here. So I am going to turn my work again to get this new square that we're connecting to be on the right. So in this bottom corner, I'm going to find that chain 1 stitch. So that's right here. And I am going to go into the back loop only of that stitch. Go into the back loop only of this chain 1 stitch, which is the last stitch that we did in our last row. And I'm going to pull my working yarn through all 3 of those loops on our hook. So now again, it is the same all the way down as the ones that we just did. So keep going into the back loops only, and then I will meet you back when I get closer to the end of this one. So now my last stitch is that chain 1 in the corner, so I am going to join those. And now we are finished joining in this row. So I'm going to tie off, leave a long enough tail to be woven in. So now we're going to have this kind of capital T shape. So we have 3 squares with the 1 in the middle. So now we are going to connect our squares here and here. So in order to do that, I am just going to fold them like this and flat slip stitch down the seam, same on the other side. Fold it like this to flat slip stitch down that seam, and you are going to have a kind of square, unfinished cube type of a shape. So I will just show you quickly this one. So we are going to join these the exact same way that we joined the first time. So we will just start. You can start either down here on the side or here on the side. Doesn't really matter because we will have to tuck our ends and weave them in either way. So right side, back loop only. Find the next stitch on the left side, back loop only, and you will just join down the seam. So once I finish this one, I'll take my next one and fold it over like this, and I will seam here. So I'm going to do these two, and then I'll meet you back. So I just finished the hood part of our hooded scarf. So this is how it should look. So to get started on attaching our scarf, we are going to look at the back of our hood, and we are going to find the middle of the back part of our hood. So that's right there. I'm just going to place a stitch marker there so that we keep the spot. Next, we're going to grab our scarf. So what I am going to do to find the middle of our scarf, is I am going to take both ends, line them up, and fold the scarf in half. So I've got the scarf folded in half. I am going to take another stitch marker, and I'm going to put that right into that middle stitch. So now we can see it didn't go through quite straight, so I'm just going to adjust it a little bit to make it straight. There we go. So that is the middle stitch of our scarf. So to attach our scarf to our hood, I am going to lay my scarf flat. I'm going to grab my hood and kind of move it so that it's laying flat, or as flat as it can get. And we're going to line those stitch markers up. So there are 30 stitches between the middle of our hood where our stitch marker is and the beginning of this square where we're going to start connecting to our scarf. So I am going to take my scarf and I'm going to count 30 stitches to the right of where our stitch marker is. So I just found my 30th stitch from my stitch marker. So I stuck a stitch marker in it so I don't lose it. Now I'm going to go down here to the end of our hood. So I am going to turn these to make it a little bit easier to connect. So I am going to find the chain one of this last corner so I can see the 3 double crochets. Here is my chain one. So I am going to make a slip knot. Put that on my hook. And then I'm going to go into the back loop only of that chain one. Move that working yarn to the middle. Now go to the back loop only of that stitch we just marked, your 30th stitch from the middle of your scarf. So now I'm going to pull my working yarn through those 3 loops. And so we're attached. And now from here on out, I am just going to flat slip stitch our hood to the scarf the same way that I flat slip stitched our squares together. So back loop only on the right side, next stitch, back loop only on the left, and pull through. So I'm going to keep going, and then I will meet you back here when I get a little bit closer to the other side of our hood. I'm going to go through the chain one stitch on my right side, the next stitch on my left side, flat slip stitch, and then we are done. We are all connected, so I'm going to tie off, and I'm going to leave a pretty long tail just so I have something to weave in and make sure it's as secure as possible. So now we have our squares attached to our scarf. So here is how mine is looking from the side. So now you have a couple of options. So you could choose to just leave it like this and weave in your ends and be finished. Or you could add a border, which is what I am going to do. So I am actually going to start my border up here on the hood. So I am going to start kind of closer to this corner here. I am going to go into this stitch here. It doesn't really matter which stitch exactly you start in, but I like to start a little bit closer to this corner just because I feel like it's less noticeable when you're wearing it. So I have my hook inserted. I am going to take my yarn. I am sticking with this pink color, but if you want your border to be a pop of color or you want to switch it up, you totally can. So I am just going to stick that on my hook, pull that through, chain one. Now I'm going to half double crochet into that same stitch, and now I'm going to place a half double crochet in every stitch across my hood. So to half double crochet, you'll yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop. You've got 3 loops, pull through all 3. So I am going to half double crochet in every stitch on my hood. I'm also holding any tails I come across onto my work and crocheting over them so that I have less to weave in at the end. This makes finishing up your project a little bit easier and a little bit less time consuming. So I'm going to keep going with the half double crochets. I'll meet you here to show you how we handle these stitches where we attached our squares. So I'm getting close to those stitches where we attached. So these are the corner stitches of these squares. So these technically are both stitches that we would put a half double crochet into. You can put a half double crochet into each, but just a tip, I like to half double crochet them together because I feel like it really helps smooth out the finished look of the hood. So what I'm doing is yarning over, inserting into the stitch, pull up a loop, then into the next stitch, I'm going to insert and pull up a loop, and then I'm going to pull through all 4 loops. Then I'm just going to continue with half double crocheting in every stitch. And that kind of just helped pull it together instead of having it look so separated here. So I am going to keep going, half double crocheting in each stitch until I get down here, and then I will meet you back there. So I just got to where our squares and our scarf meet. So the same way that I did back there, I'm going to half double crochet these 2 stitches together. So I am going to yarn over, insert into the stitch, pull up a loop, and then go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, pull through all 4. So now we are moving on to the scarf portion. So we are just going to continue half double crocheting all the way down our scarf. So I am coming up to where our scarf curves, kind of that corner. So in this last stitch right before the corner, I'm going to place 2 half double crochets to help us turn the corner. And then I am just going to keep on going, doing a half double crochet in every stitch. And when I come back to the corner here, I'm going to place 2 half double crochets to turn the corner again and then go all the way back up the other side of my scarf. So I'll keep going and then I will meet you back when I get close to where we started. So I'm getting back to here where our hood meets our scarf, and this is where we started. So I am going to go ahead and finish off these last few stitches before where we started. So I am going to slip stitch into that first half double crochet, not the chain 2, but the half double crochet. So now that I'm slip stitched, I am going to tie off, leaving a tail to weave in at the end. Now we are done. So we are all finished with our hooded scarf. The only thing that we have left to do is just weave in those ends and block it if you would like to. So enjoy your new scarf, and thank you for watching.